1,400 hours. Southern Caribbean. The first indication that something deliberate was happening came not from a weapons track, but from a pattern. The kind of pattern that only becomes visible when you have been watching a specific adversary's doctrine long enough to recognize its shape. Two contacts entered the air defense identification zone from the southeast at 410 knots. The lead aircraft was a Chinese-built Shanxi Y-9 signals intelligence platform, the Venezuelan Air Force variant designated for electronic intelligence collection. Its belly packed with receivers capable of cataloging radar emissions across a frequency range that covers every active sensor in a U.S. Navy destroyer's complement. Flying escort on both flanks were two Su-30 Mk2s, close enough to the Y-9 to provide an engagement response if someone attempted to close on it, far enough to give their own sensors an independent look at whatever the collection mission provoked. The surface piece of the operation was already running. A Guayquerí-class offshore patrol vessel had been holding a position that straddled the primary shipping lanes since 0900 hours, its engines cycling between high-power sprint and slow drift in a pattern that produced significant broadband noise on any passive sonar in the area and a distinctive surface radar return that any self-respecting watch officer in a carrier strike group would feel compelled to actively resolve. The patrol boat was a lever designed to apply specific pressure. A surface contact behaving ambiguously in a sensitive area tends to produce the one response the Y-9 needed most: a fire control radar illumination from the Aegis system aboard whatever American destroyer had the watch. Once that radar lit up, the Y-9's receivers would have the operational frequency, pulse repetition interval, waveform parameters, and emission signature of the AN/SPY-1D system. That package, transmitted back to Chinese defense industry analysts, would be worth considerably more to future adversary planning than anything the Su-30 Mk2s could have accomplished kinetically. The U.S. Navy's counter began before the Y-9 reached the ADIZ boundary. The command that went through the USS Preble's ship-wide communications network was 3 words: Set Condition MCON. Electronic silence is not a passive state. It is an active discipline that requires every system on a 9,200-ton warship to shut down its transmitters in a coordinated sequence that leaves the ship receiving without broadcasting. The AN/SPY-1D radar, the AN/SPG-62 fire control illuminators, the SPS-73 surface navigation radar, all of them went to passive or standby. The Preble stopped being an electronic lighthouse. The ship was not blind. A P-8A Poseidon, orbiting at 28,000 feet, 80 miles northeast, was feeding a complete tactical picture through a low probability of intercept data link, whose emissions were specifically designed to be undetectable by the Y-9's collection suite at the distances involved. The Preble's Combat Information Center had the same air picture it would have had with its own radar active. But its own radar was contributing nothing to the electromagnetic spectrum for the Y-9 to collect. For the Y-9's operators, the effect was disorienting. A U.S. Navy destroyer operating in this area was expected to radiate. The patrol boat's provocative behavior was specifically designed to make it radiate. A silent destroyer either indicated a technical malfunction, a crew that was not performing standard watch procedures, or a crew that had specifically decided not to give the collection aircraft what it was there for. The first 2 explanations were optimistic. The third meant the collection mission had been anticipated. Anticipation in electronic intelligence operations is the most operationally dangerous thing that can happen to you, because it means the other side is no longer reacting, it is executing. The B-52H entered the operational area from the northwest at 41,000 feet at 1347 hours. Its mission was not bombing. It was not even primarily about the ADM-160 miniature air-launched decoys it was carrying, though those would matter shortly. Its primary role in this engagement was as the platform for the electronic warfare package that had been specifically prepared for Venezuelan air defense system profiles based on 12 months of collection data from prior operations in the region. The package did not jam. Jamming, broadband noise emission, is immediately identifiable as an act of electronic warfare and tells the target exactly what is happening. What the B-52 system did instead was absorb the Y-9's own radar interrogation pulses, manipulate their return timing and amplitude, and reflect them back in a pattern that told the Y-9's receivers it was looking at contacts that did not exist. Not noise. A coherent, structured false picture. The digital equivalent of a forged document. Convincing because it is built from the target's own authentication materials. On the Y-9's collection displays, a carrier strike group materialized. Not randomly, in a formation and at a heading that matched an approach profile the Venezuelan operators' training scenarios had specifically prepared them for. The contacts had the right spacing, the right speeds, the right radar emission signatures for an American carrier battle group conducting an approach to strike position. 12 contacts total, all of them Phantom. The Su-30 Mk2 escorts broke to intercept the leading elements of the Ghost formation. Their pilots were doing their jobs as they understood them. The tactical picture their aircraft systems were showing them was unambiguous, and the response was the one their doctrine specified. They flew northwest at military power toward contacts that would never resolve into actual aircraft because they were not aircraft. The Y-9 was now without its escort cover. The two ADM-160CM ALDs dropped from the B-52's underwing pylons at 14:09 hours and ignited their TJ-50 turbojet engines. The MALD's operational concept exploits a specific characteristic of threat library-dependent air defense systems. They are programmed to respond to profiles that match their threat database, and a $120,000 decoy that emits the precise radar return and electronic signature of an F-35C on a terminal attack profile will receive the same treatment from those systems as an actual F-35C would. Because the systems have no mechanism to distinguish one from the other at the processing level their threat libraries operate at. The two MALDs pitched toward the Venezuelan coastline at Mach 0.91 on a profile that matched the specific F-35C terminal approach geometry that Venezuelan air defense doctrine flagged as the highest priority intercept scenario. On the radar displays of the Bali Coastal Defense Battery covering the northern approach corridor, two faint, fast-moving contacts appeared without warning from a bearing that the Phantom Carrier Group Deception had been conditioning the operators to watch for the past 4 minutes. The battery's threat evaluation algorithm did not deliberate. A contact matching the F-35C profile at that speed and bearing gets an automatic fire control response. The battery's engagement radar activated. The engagement radar on an anti-ship coastal defense system is the single most sensitive piece of intelligence a passive collection operation can obtain. It is the system's fire control brain, the emitter whose specific frequency, pulse characteristics, and frequency hopping sequence define how that system guides its weapons to target and therefore how those weapons can be defeated, jammed, or decoyed in a future engagement. Once an engagement radar activates, it broadcasts its most critical technical parameters to every passive receiver in range. The TS-380 radar jammer activated in the same moment. Its operators following the protocol that specified active jamming when a high-threat attack profile was detected. The jammer went to maximum emission, filling the local spectrum with its operational frequencies, power levels, and modulation patterns. Both systems ran at maximum output for approximately 11 seconds before their operators processed that the inbound F-35C contacts had behaved in a way that real F-35Cs do not. They had not released any weapons, had not altered their approach geometry as an actual attack run would require, and were now declining to appear on the frequency ranges the engagement radar was using to develop its fire control solution. 11 seconds is not a long time in any normal context. In passive electronic intelligence collection, 11 seconds of a fully active engagement radar and a fully active jammer is an intelligence windfall. The Prebol's passive receivers and the P-8A's collection systems had captured the complete technical profile of both systems. The Y-9, which had been the instrument of the original collection operation, had now become a witness to the collection of its own side's most sensitive electronic parameters. The Su-30 Mk2s, 60 nautical miles northwest, chasing phantom contacts that refused to resolve, had consumed fuel and separated themselves from any useful position in the engagement. They turned back toward the Y-9 as their fuel state required recovery consideration. The collection mission was effectively over. The Guaycari patrol vessel was still at its position in the shipping lane. The Preble ended its MCON posture at 14:18 hours in a specific and deliberate sequence. The AN/SPY-1D lit up in single target track mode, not in its search configuration, but in the fire control mode whose emission signature a ship's bridge crew, receiving its output on their threat receivers, would experience as a continuous fire control lock. The distinction between a search radar and a fire control illuminator is immediately apparent to any naval crew whose threat warning system is calibrated correctly. The patrol vessel system was calibrated correctly. Below the surface, a Virginia-class submarine that had been running silent in the shipping lane's subsurface approach path was already building an acoustic model of the patrol vessel. The Virginia's large aperture bow array produces passive acoustic tracking of sufficient resolution to identify a vessel's specific propulsion machinery, generator harmonics, and propeller blade rate signature, a profile that is as unique to an individual hull as a fingerprint. The patrol vessel's crew had no indication the submarine was there. An MH-60R Seahawk from the Preble arrived on scene at 14:23 hours and established a hover 400 meters off the patrol vessel's port bow. The helicopter did not arm its weapon systems. It lowered the AN/AQS-22 dipping sonar array into the water and activated it in active mode. An active sonar ping at close range is experienced inside a steel-hulled vessel as a sharp metallic impact. The acoustic energy transmits through the water column, through the hull plating, and into every compartment simultaneously. It is not painful in the way a physical blow is painful, but it is unmistakable in its message. Someone is directly beneath you, their sonar system is active, and they know exactly where you are. The Virginia's passive sonar had been tracking the patrol vessel for 4 hours. The MH-60R's active ping confirmed the geometry the submarine already knew and ensured the surface crew understood it too. The Guaycari's captain ordered a course change toward Venezuelan waters at 14:26 hours. The vessel was doing 18 knots south by the time the MH-60R retrieved its sonar array and returned to the Preble's flight deck. The intelligence accounting of this operation belongs on paper because it clarifies something that the outcome, no weapons fired, both sides intact, patrol vessel departing, can obscure if you only look at the visible results. Venezuela committed a sophisticated multi-domain collection operation involving a dedicated signals intelligence aircraft, 2 fleet fighters as escort, and a surface vessel as provocation bait. The intended product was the Aegis system's operational frequency and emission parameters. The actual product was the complete technical profile of the TS-380 jammer and the BAL-E Coastal Defense Battery's engagement radar, both of which are now in the U.S. Navy's Signals Intelligence Database, cross-referenced with the collection from the MALD bait run and the Su-30 Mk2 radar emissions captured during their Phantom intercept run. The Y-9 went home having recorded nothing useful about the Preble's systems. The Preble went home having recorded everything useful about Venezuela's systems. The trap was real. It just closed on the wrong side. The broader lesson embedded in this engagement is not about any specific platform or jamming technique. It is about the relationship between doctrinal rigidity and electronic vulnerability. The BAL-E battery's threat library and the TS-380's activation protocol are both rigid, prescribed responses. If contact matches profile X, execute response Y. That rigidity is operationally efficient in environments where the threat library is accurate and the inputs to the system are genuine. It is exploitable in environments where someone has studied the library, knows what input produces what response, and can synthesize that input at a fraction of the cost of the response it generates. A $120,000 MALD that produces an 11-second engagement radar activation worth 10 years of intelligence value is the specific cost ratio that defines why electronic deception is the most economically favorable tool in this kind of gray zone engagement. Venezuela spent considerably more in fuel, flight hours, crew time, and operational security exposure than the US spent in decoy hardware and P-8A flight time. The Preble resumed its assigned patrol track at 1441 hours. Here is the question this operation raises that has no clean answer. The MALD's effectiveness depends on Venezuela's threat library accurately reflecting the F-35C signature that the decoy replicates. Threat libraries are updated. The next generation of Venezuelan air defense software integration, presumably provided through the same Chinese defense industry relationships that supplied the Y-9, will incorporate what was learned from this engagement. At what point does the MALD's deception fidelity require updating to stay ahead of the threat library revision cycle? And what is the classified classification process that keeps that fidelity current against adversaries who are actively studying the decoy's emission profile from the engagement records they captured? Leave your analysis below.